Then you can have yours.
Okay, here we go. Let's get started. We're going to, I'm just start pulling up the Facebook page now. Right, we're streaming live on Facebook. I'm just going to spotlight this. And we're going to mute everybody. If you want to ask questions, please unmute yourself, but I'll mute you for now for the Facebook share. And we're going to turn on the recorder. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What a pleasure it is to see all of you tonight on Facebook Live, on Zoom, and a pleasure also to be recording this year tonight for TorahAnytime.com. As always, if you want to get some quality Torah content, please make your way to TorahAnytime.com, where you'll see hundreds. You have well over 100,000 shiurim on Torah Anytime. So something for anyone and everyone on the shiur. Okay, tonight we're starting Parasha Noach. Last week we were, normally the shiur is on Tuesday night, so we missed Parasha Pearls. So it's the new season. We've started a new sefer and we've restarted the Torah again. And we start with the idea of Noach. Eila told us Noach, these are the children, these are the happenings of Noach, depending on how you translate it. Noach ish tzaddik tamamai b'daras of Noach was a tzaddik. He was a wholesome person in his generations. Esau that came to Noach, and Noach went together with God. So Rashi tells us something very interesting. Rashi says, Bidorosov. There's a second Rashi here. There are those that say that this is actually a positive accolade to Noach, and to say Koshkin Tzadikim, if he was in a generation of tzaddikim, he would be an even greater tzaddik. There's some that say no, this is not meant to be an accolade. This is actually meant to be a denigration of Noach. In his generation, he was a tzaddik. If he had lived in the generation of Avraham Avinu, then he wouldn't be considered anything. We wouldn't consider Noach to be special in those days. So there are a few questions to be asked over here just to try to get our head around this. Number one, if Noach, the Torah describes Noach as a tzaddik. So if the Torah describes Noach as a tzaddik, why are we going out of our way instead to describe Noach as someone who is not so great? Many people ask this question. If the Torah says tzaddik haya b'darasi was a tzaddik in generations, why should we say that he wasn't such a great person? Why should we turn it around? Why should we twist it? What are we doing? And why are we comparing him to Avraham Avinu? What difference does it make? It's really not right. You have somebody who's really nice, and you say, yeah, you're a nice guy, but compared to so-and-so, you're really nothing. Why are you comparing? Why are we comparing and contrasting? Noach was a good guy. Great. So you say, Avraham Avinu was greater than him. Fine. Nobody's arguing the point. Avraham Avinu was greater than him. So, but why do we have to make a point of saying that Avraham Avinu was greater than him? Just leave it as is. Noach is Noach, and Avraham Avinu was in another generation. It's not to be discussed. So why do we have this discussion here? I'm giving shir now. What do you need? Try the main shul. If you have not something to turn on the lights, or try the Eish room.
Which way is that?
Down the hallway over the corridor over there, and there by the room. Right. So this is what happens. Baruch Hashem, we have weddings again in the shul, and they're coming to the Beis Medrash to try to daven Mariv. Baruch Hashem, that we have people that are willing to make wedding now, and that we can make big weddings, and that people are coming back to our shul to make weddings. So it's not nothing to be upset about in the fact that you get interrupted in the middle of the shir for that kind of thing. So here we go. So that was the question. So I saw a beautiful idea, and I'll preface this idea with a story. It's a famous story that they tell about the Gaon of Vilna. The Gaon of Vilna was just head and shoulders above everybody else in his generation. And he lived in a generation of many, many great people. Yet he was still the greatest of all those great people. And what happened with the Gaon of Vilna was that there was someone by the name of the Maggid of a town called Dubna. And the Dubna Maggid was famous for giving allegories, for saying parables. And he called in the Dubna Maggid to give him Musar. And the Dubna Maggid came in. The Dubna Maggid was a very holy, saintly person. And it's not so easy to give Musar to the Gaon of Vilna. Who wants to give Musar to the Gaon? The Gaon of Vilna at the end of the year could tell you in minutes, he wasted 3 minutes this year by not learning Torah. That's in an entire year. We make 3 minutes every 10 minutes. So it's not to be compared. So what do you say to the Gaon of Vilna? So he came to the Gaon of Vilna and he said to the Gaon of Vilna, he said, listen, you think you're such top stuff? You think it's so great? Big deal. You sit in this room and you try to go ahead and you try to learn. If you really want to do something big, instead of sitting in a room and trying to learn Torah, go out there. Go out into the world. You don't have to, well, you think, who says that you're so great for doing that? And the Gaon of Vilna was very, very taken by what he said. But then he thought to himself and he said afterwards, after all that, he said, yeah, but you know what? What I do is also something impressive. And it was, because the Gaon of Vilna learned nonstop, almost 24 hours a day. It was still very impressive. But he was saying, like, why don't you go out? And the truth is, you will find in Klal Yisrael, over the years and over the generations, you will find that there are different types of people. And these types of people, there are certain tzaddikim that are tzaddikim for the masses, and there are certain tzaddikim that are not tzaddikim for the masses. So, for example, I was recently listening to a shir on the Kotzker, actually a talk on the Kotzker Rebbe. Rabbi Beryl Wein, who is a noted historian, Jewish historian, gave a talk about the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern Halpern of Kotsk, and he was very, very famous. And what made him so famous was the following. Just to give you a bit of a background over here. You start off with the regular Rebbes. The regular Rebbes are very much they were against elitism. There was a great elitism that happened within Lithuanian and Polish Jewry. So if you were Talmid Chacham and you knew how to learn Torah, then everybody would be, bowing down. They're not bowing down to you, but people really gave you covet. But if you were just a regular Joe Schmo, which mainly to 98% of people were just regular people, so nobody gave them cover, no one paid them any attention. And they started getting very, very upset with this. And so the Hasidic revolution had to do with giving honor and bringing back just the regular Jew, just the regular bog standard person. So that was a Hasidic revolution. Then within that, you had the greatest of the Rebbes of Poland that had literally tens of thousands of people that came to him, was a man by the name of Rabbi Yitzhak Yitzhak Horowitz, and he was known as the Choza of Lublin, the seer of Lublin, who was the greatest Rebbe of the generation in sheer amounts of numbers. And he had a Talmud. His biggest student was a fellow by the name, I don't remember what his name was. I think it was also the same name, actually. He actually had the same name as the Choza of Lublin. It was also Rabbi Yitzhak Yaakov Horowitz, and he was known as the Yid of Pshischa, the holy Jew of Pshischa. And he took over. We were saying about somebody of Simcha Bunim of Pshischa, and then Rav Simcha Bunim of Pshischa was taken over by Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk. And Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk basically sat in his room and he didn't want to speak to anybody. He wasn't the Rebbe that wanted all the people to come in and to say, oh, my cow's not giving milk, please can you give me a bracha for my cow, or my business isn't doing well, or I can't marry off my daughter. He just wasn't that kind of a Rebbe. He sat in his room and he learned. And when he did come out, he roared at people and he used to scream at them, Ganovim, you are immoral people, you are robbers, you are people that are murderers, and people used to go running away all over the place. And he was the Rebbe. And they had thousands of people that came to see this man. And you couldn't even see him, but you went there on the off chance he would come out of his room and start yelling at you. But it's not the normal Rebbe Talmud kind of thing. It's not the normal Hasidic Rebbe, but he was a Rebbe that did his own thing in his room, and he did his thing. And he wasn't really interested. And then afterwards, at one point or another, it broke, the ice broke, and people went away from Kotsk, and they followed on with another Rebbe who took over, and Rabbi the Ishbitzer. And what happens is, at that point, the Kotsker Rebbe basically locked himself into a room and sat there and learned for the rest of his life, basically. And that was him. He was a Rebbe that sat in his life and did nothing. The Gaon was a Rebbe and sat and again, didn't do anything. He didn't go out to the masses. He just did his own avodah. That's it. Whereas you have other Rabbonim that were out there. So take the Choza of Lublin. He had all these people coming to him and all these people saying, you know what, my cow's not giving milk and my business is not doing well. And I'm having problems with my son-in-law and I'm having problems with my brother-in-law, with my father-in-law. And we don't know how to split the Yerusha. We don't know how to give charity. And he took care of all of these, nurturing these souls, going out to the masses and being there for the masses. So you have certain Rabbonim that are there for the masses. Their job is to be there with the masses. And there are certain Rabbonim that don't want to be with the masses. They want to be sheltered away from everybody else. Putting themselves with the masses is something that they find very, very daunting, scary. Who knows what's going to happen to them? Who knows what's going to happen to their learning? Who knows what's going to happen to their level? And therefore, they don't go out to the masses. They just stick to themselves. So Rav Zalman Sorotzkin, as well as Rav Shimon Schwab, both speak about this, and they say, if you look at Noach, Noach was a tzaddik, tamim. Tamim means wholesome, but it also means, it says, Noach walked with God. You know what Noach did? Noach kept himself. He didn't get involved not in his generation and not in their problems and not in praying for them. Noach just kept to himself and said, look, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm not interested in everybody else. I'll just do my thing and that's it. That's who Noach was. And on the one hand, what that did for Noach was that it kept Noach righteous in a generation full of people that were totally corrupt, immoral, that were ganovim, and he was able to make it through that generation. You know how you made it through that generation? You don't hang out with anybody else. If you become friendly with everybody, you start to behave like everybody else. But Noach says, I don't want to be friends with all these people. I don't want to have anything to do with them. So he sits in his house, or he sits in his room, and he does his own thing, and that's it. Then comes the Mabul, the flood. And when it comes to the flood, what then happens is the following. He needs to start building a teva, and he needs to start coming forward and speaking to people and trying to convince them that, you know what, God is going to bring a Mabul, he's going to bring a flood, and you have to do teshuvah, etc., etc. How successful was Noach at doing that? You know how successful he was? Awful. He was just awful at it. In 120 years of doing kiruv, he did not make any change in one single individual. So if he didn't make a change in one single individual of 120 years, it sounds almost like, how did that happen? How could it be that Noach couldn't make a change not in one single individual of 120 years? The answer is that Noach, as the Mefarshim say, that wasn't his modus operandi. He wasn't the kind of tzaddik that goes out to the masses and tries to bring the people back. That wasn't how he functioned. Rather, what he tried to do was, he was going to be a tzaddik tamim, he was going to be a tzaddik to himself, keep to himself, learn, daven, do his mitzvahs, and just keep away from everybody else. When you take that person and you have to turn him around into becoming an extrovert, into becoming somebody that has to do kiruv, that has to approach people and try to convince them to do the right thing and to do tshuva, you know what happens? It's a disaster. It doesn't work. And for good reason it doesn't work, because it's not his personality. You cannot take somebody who doesn't have the right kind of personality and send them to try to speak to people, because very often it doesn't work. There's actually an interesting biography that just came out recently about a man by the name of Rabbi Meir Schuster. Rabbi Meir Schuster was somebody who used to stand at the kotel and used to come over to people who were davening at the kotel, and he used to approach them and say to them, listen, maybe you want to come learn some Torah. And used to send them to Esha Torah, and used to send them to other yeshivas. And a lot of people became frum by being approached by Meir Schuster. Now, you read the book about Meir Schuster. I didn't read it, but everybody says you read the book about Meir Schuster, and you'll see that this Rabbi Schuster, he was a quiet individual. He was an introvert. He didn't like doing this. He didn't like walking over to strangers. He had the same opening line. Excuse me, do you have the time? That's how we start with everybody. Do you have the time? Yeah, the time is, oh, where are you from, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't like speaking to people, have you ever tried networking? You go into a room full of people and you have to try networking. You have to find other people that you can do work with, or other people that want to have your business, et cetera, et cetera. So some people are experts. They work the room. They go from person to person, from place to place, speak to this one, speak to that one, say hello to this one. They walk out of the room with a whole bunch of business cards. They walk out of the room with a whole bunch of good leads. They're not great. You have other people that are in the room that are looking around at the groups of people like, where should I go? Who should I speak to? What should I do? I feel so invisible. Nobody's coming in to talk to me. Introverted people. That's just not the thing, right? And you have two types of people. There's not better or worse. It's just different kinds of people with different kinds of temperament. Noach was a second kind of a person. He was an introvert. It wasn't for him. And therefore, when you take Noach and you say, Noach, go out there and do something. What am I supposed to do? Build a teva. And then when people come over to you, try to convince them to do teshuvah. That wasn't his fach. That wasn't the kind of thing that he could do. He just didn't have any success in that. Noach was successful because he had his system. What's Noach's system? Noach's system is I stick to myself. I just make sure I don't do anything wrong. What everybody else does, irrelevant. I, in my room, are going to keep my moral standards and everything correctly. That's the story of Noach. But therefore, we say there's a difference between Noach and between Avraham Avinu. Because Avraham Avinu not only had the character, but he had the moral fortitude to be able to look people in the eye and to say, hey, guys, what are you doing? And then, what do you mean, what are we doing? We're serving our idols. We're doing this. We're doing that. He says, how could you do that? To start arguing with people, to start arguing religion, to start arguing theology with people, it's not easy. You need a certain kind of character. You need to be able to answer the questions. You need to not be intimidated by speaking to people or by any arguments that people are going to make. It's not easy. When you start off and people ask you a question, you're like, oh, I'm going to say now. It's very, very worrisome. And so Noach was not able to do that. Avraham Avinu's generation was a very different generation. Avraham Avinu's generation was a generation of people that needed bringing closer to God. So how do you take that generation, you bring them closer to God? You bring them in and you give them to eat and you give them to drink and you give them a place to stay and you start talking theology with them and you can convince them of that. And Avraham Avinu was brilliant at doing that. But that was Avraham Avinu's purpose. That was Avraham Avinu's character. And that was the thing that Avraham Avinu could do best, which is why he did that. And therefore the Gemara says, Tzaddik Tamim Haya B'Darasim, in his generation, he was a great tzaddik. But the Torah is trying to tell you that Noach got stuck on that. But in the Dar of Avraham Avinu, he wouldn't be anything. What do you mean he wouldn't be anything? Why would he be nothing? Why would you take this person who's righteous and say he's nothing? I'm saying he's not nothing, but he wouldn't be able to connect with the people. You have to realize somebody that cannot connect with the people is just not going to get through to people. I remember I spoke about this last summer a few times. I don't think I spoke about it to you, but I spoke about it in a school, and I spoke in a seminary, and I gave a few doshas about this. I heard Rabbi Marmestein of the New Sem say the following. He said, R minus R equals R. Did I say this to you guys also? Can you guys hear this? Does it sound familiar? He says, no, R. So he said, R stands for rules, minus R, which is relationship, equals R, rebellion. If you're going to try to impose rules on someone without having a relationship with that person, all you're going to do is you're going to be able to create a rebellion or mutiny. Nobody wants to hear anything from you if they think you don't care about them, if you're just there to tell them what to do. And I changed that around when I gave my speeches to the different people that I spoke to. I spoke to college teachers, I spoke to regular teachers, and I said something else. I said, it's R minus R equals R. For me, is rules minus relevance equals rebellion. If I'm going to teach you all these rules, the Torah says, wave a lulav. Why? I don't know. That's what the Torah says. What does that have to do with me in 2021? What can I learn from it? Why is that relevant to me? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So if it's not relevant to me, you know what people say? Nowadays, very much people are into this. Is very much the parlance of people. People will say, if it's relevant to me, fine, I'm happy to work with it. If it's not relevant to me, so why should I keep these rules that are irrelevant? Why should I drive myself crazy? I'm not going to eat. People make up all these reasons. You don't eat. Somebody recently was saying to me, the reason people didn't eat pig meat was because it wasn't hygienic. That's not true. Because if the reason you didn't eat pork was because of hygiene, guess what? Nowadays, we have very, very exacting standards of hygiene. And my guess would be that pork nowadays is going to be a lot more hygienic to eat than any cattle that you ate 200 years ago. I'm sure of it. Because 200 years ago, we didn't have fridges and we didn't have people, vets that are looking after, and we didn't have people looking after the animals. I'm sure that the meat that we have today, even the pork we have today, is much more hygienic than anything that 200 years ago. Well, okay, so then you're allowed to eat pork. Of course not. Because you can't eat pork. It's not the reason. So when people start giving reasons, you end up doing is you end up getting people twisted into knots when you give those reasons. You can't give that reason. Okay? So, no, lost my train of thought now on the pork over here. What was I saying? Yeah, that's so that you have to have the conversation. You have to have a relevance. So you have to give people a relevance. So you can say, why don't I eat meat and milk together. Why don't you eat pork? Okay, so you have to find a relevant reason behind it that even nowadays you could say, yes, this makes sense. Certain things you might not even be able to find a relevant reason. I know paraduma, you might not find a relevant reason for, but other things you'll find, you say, look, this is symbolic. It means this, it means that. This is why we do it. But if you don't have relevance, people won't connect to you. And that's what Avraham Avinu was able to do. Avraham Avinu was able to be relevant to those people. Noach was not relevant to his generation. But that doesn't matter, because for Noach to be relevant, he didn't need to be necessarily relevant for his generation. He needed to be, for Avraham Avinu's generation, he needed to be relevant for his generation. In his generation, hiding away, making sure he doesn't go anywhere else, that was perfect. And that's what Noach did. And so that is the idea over here of Noach. You have Noach was a tzaddik in his generation that had his own way of functioning, which was different to the way that Avraham Avinu functioned. And that's why in Avraham Avinu's generation, he wouldn't have been of anything, because that's not what was necessary in Avraham Avinu's generation. However, Noach was still a great tzaddik and still somebody to be looked up to in a very, very great way. Okay, so that is the first idea that I want to speak about Noach. Okay, the second thought is the following. Oh boy, do you hear the music in the background? I'm just wondering if you hear the music from the Simcha. Okay, excellent. I'm glad to hear that you don't hear the music on the Simcha on this because the music is coming through. But if you hear me more than the music, that's better. So now, I saw Rav Schwab says also, he asked the following question. He says, Noach spent such a long time in building this teva. Noach spent 120 years building this massive boat. So if he spent 120 years building this massive boat, and the reason for building this massive boat was that Noach had to make this big show of building the boat so that people would see him, and people would come and they would ask him why he's building the boat, and he would try to bring them back to do teshuvah, which was entirely unsuccessful. So the question is, if it was so unsuccessful, why did God make him do it? And was that 120 years worth of waste? Was that a waste? The whole 120 years, was it a waste? So Rav Schwab says it's important to note that it wasn't necessarily a waste. You have to look at what Noach did as waste. He said, look, he worked for 120 years and he got nowhere. Rather, the way to see it is that Noach had something else that was going on for him that was also very important to note. And that's the following. For 1 entire year, Noach had to now do something else. Noach had to create a new generation. That means God says, I took over the destruction of the world, and Noach, I'm giving you a small kernel for you to take that kernel of what's left over of civilization and to take care of it and to tend it in a special way in your teva. And that's exactly what Noach did. So God says, I can't give you, there are two jobs to be done over here. The job of destroying the world, no, it's not for you to destroy the world. I'm going to destroy the world. I'm going to give you a small amount. That means you have Noach and his families. You have, on top of Noach and his families, you also have the animals that are with him, all the different animals, etc., etc. And that was Noach's whole, that was everything that was left. Noach's remit now, during that time, was twofold. The world had been corrupted by two different things. That's what it tells us. Which is moral, sexual corruption. And the world had become full of stealing, full of monetary corruption. And now when the different animals came into this teva, they had to do two things, and the people as well. Number one, they had to abstain from any intimate conduct, even with their own spouses. We read that Noach wasn't allowed to have cohabitation with his spouses. His children, when the Torah tells us Noach comes into the teva, Noach and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives. Why does it tell you that? Because Noach and his sons were in one area and the wives were in another area. They were not allowed to be together. Why was that? Why were you not allowed? So one of the reasons given is because when there's so much destruction going on in the world, it's wrong for you to be involved in your own intimate pleasures with your spouse. But the other thing is, and this is what I saw today, is that the other reason why it was wrong for them to be together is because it was important to note that instead of the sexual immorality and the sexual depravity that existed in the generation of the flood, Noach now had to go all the way to the other extreme. He had to abstain from his wife, and his children have to abstain from their wives, and all the animals have to abstain from their spouses, or whatever you want to call it, or from the other animals for an entire year. That's taking it to the other extreme. And the other thing they had to do was, instead of stealing from other people, it was all chesed. Noach and his family were involved in chesed 24/7, the entire day, every single day. Why? Because they had to feed all the animals. Imagine if you had a floating zoo like that. Sometimes you can buy yourself, become a zookeeper for the day. They take you like to 2 or 3 animals, and they show you how to feed the animal. Then they make you shovel their dung. If you pay the money to become the zookeeper for the day in Blackpool Zoo, they don't start giving you these big things and the big broom and say, here you go start shoveling up whatever's left over from the elephant, because nobody would pay money to do that. So they take you to an animal like the giraffe, and they show you how to feed the giraffe, and they take another 1 or 2 animals, and I became a zookeeper for the day. Yeah, but that's not being a zookeeper. A zookeeper has to take care of everything. And if you have a zoo that's massive and there's only a few people working in the zoo, you're busy constantly giving and giving and giving and more and more and more. And this made Noach, and this made the animals that were with him, it turned them into a new society that was worthy then of being brought out of the teva, being brought out of this ark, and instead to start the world anew. Because taking that depravity and rolling it back, taking the sexual misconduct, taking the stealing, rolling it back and saying, no more misconduct, no more stealing. And the other way around, to be as good as you could about it, to be as moral and way above and beyond everything. That was Noach's job. And when Noach did that, then after a year of doing that, then Noach could come out and he could start the world again, the civilization again, not just with a sort of kernel of people that are okay, but with a kernel of people that had taken all the depravity from beforehand, worked on themselves to undo that depravity and start again with a normal set of, with a normal set. One of the mistakes that Noach actually makes, which I saw today also, where this will finish, is that Noach thinks when he comes out of the teva that he's done such a great job, he's back to being almost like Adam HaRishon. He's back to being like the first man. He's gotten rid of all of the sins. We're a new generation. We are a new kind of people. We have now built a new society with a nucleus of people that are special and that are holy. And therefore, you know what Noach does? Of all the things that he plants, why does he plant grapes? Why does he plant that? Why does he drink and get drunk? The answer is because Noach thought, now, that's it. I'm back to like Adam HaRishon before the sin. If I'm like Adam HaRishon before the sin, I can plant the wine and I can drink and nothing's going to happen. I'm not going to sin and nobody else is going to sin. And we see how badly Noach got it wrong. He was wrong. He shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have planted the grapes because that caused him to sin and that caused his son Cham to sin and all sorts of things that came out of it. There was a terrible, terrible amount of collateral damage from that decision that Noach did. But that decision that Noach made was based on the fact that in that year that they were in the teva, he felt like they had reverted back not only to what it was at the time of the Mabul, but reverted back all the way to being like Adam HaRishon before the sin. Now I'm holy. Now nothing's going to be able to bring me down. Now I'm not going to be able to do anything wrong. Unfortunately, he was wrong about that, and it was very easy for him to go astray. And so ends up going astray, and then you read terrible things about Noach. And once that story happens, everything else goes downhill from there. But you see, even after that happens, Noach hadn't lost himself entirely, because Noach gives blessings to Shem, and he gives blessings to Yefes, and he curses Cham, and those blessings came to fruition, and the curses came to fruition. That means Noach was still a tzaddik at the time. It's just he realized, I thought that I become a tzaddik to an unbelievable level, and the truth is, I'm just a tzaddik at a regular level. I'm still the same Noach, maybe slightly better than I was. But to think that I was like Adam HaRishon, shouldn't have thought like that. And that's why Noach originally calls himself, he's called Ish HaAdama. Normally, a lot of people read the word Vayocha Noach Ish HaAdama, Noach, the man of the land. Why do you call himself Ish HaAdama, the man of the land? So some say, yeah, you came out of the teva, you were so holy, you come to the land and you plant grapes. So we see you're just a man of the land. You're nothing special. But others said, Ish HaAdama, who else was made out of the ground? Adam Arishon was made out of the ground. And the word Adam comes because min ha'adama, he comes from Adama. So Noach calls himself Ish ha'adama because he thinks he's gotten back to that level. But because he's not gotten back to that level, he makes a terrible mistake, and that terrible mistake has terrible repercussions for us and for all of humanity afterwards. So that's the ideas that I wanted to share with you today. Tomorrow, Mr. Hashem, next week, it's possible that I'll be in Vienna to visit my parents, so I'm not sure that I'm going to be giving the share. I'll let you know during the week if there will or there won't be a share. Thank you so much for joining me live on Facebook. Thank you for joining me over here on Zoom. And thank you to those who joined on Torah Anytime. If you want to get in touch, davideisenberg@gmail.com. Thank you and a good night.
Sure.
Thanks very much. Thank you for joining.